Get that woman on her knees now. Captain Raymond Doyle's voice cut through the street before the sirens even stopped flashing. Red and blue lights washed across Denise Carter's small brick house while 30 officers spread across the yard like they were preparing for a terrorist raid instead of confronting a middle-aged black woman standing barefoot on her own porch. Neighbors crowded the sidewalks in hoodies and slippers. Phones were already raised. Somebody whispered, "What did she do?" Another voice answered, "Must be drugs. Look at all those cops." Denise tightened her grip around the old leather wallet in her hand. The edges were worn smooth from years of use. Her dark brown fingers trembled once before she hid the movement behind her coat sleeve. "Ma'am, step forward," a SWAT officer barked. "Hands where we can see them." Denise slowly raised her hands. She wore gray sweatpants, an old navy sweatshirt, and tired eyes that looked like they had not slept in days. A porch light flickered above her head. Behind her, through the half-open front door, an old folded American flag sat on a hallway table beside framed photographs turned face down. Doyle climbed out of the lead cruiser adjusting his gloves with the confidence of a man used to controlling a room. White male. Late 50s. Sharp jaw. Perfect uniform. Every metal polished. "Denise Carter," he said loudly enough for every phone camera to hear. "You are under investigation for federal obstruction and possession of restricted materials." Murmurs rolled through the crowd. Denise looked at him without blinking. "Do you have a warrant?" Doyle smirked. "You think this is television?" A few people laughed softly. One officer pushed past the gate and aimed a flashlight directly into Denise's face. She flinched but did not step back. "You people always want special treatment," Doyle snapped. "You should have cooperated hours ago." Denise's voice stayed calm. "You are violating perimeter protocol." The nearest deputy frowned for half a second. Doyle noticed it immediately. "Do not listen to her," he barked. "She memorized some legal terms online and now she thinks she is important." A teenage boy across the street kept filming. An older woman lowered her eyes and pulled her robe tighter. Nobody stepped forward. A cold wind pushed police tape against the mailbox while more cruisers blocked the road behind the house. Denise glanced toward the armored van parked near the curb. Her eyes stopped briefly on one officer's body cam. The tiny red indicator blinked twice, then froze. The officer frowned down at it. Denise noticed. So did Deputy Elena Ruiz standing near the barricade. "Captain," Elena said carefully, "the bodycam system just flagged restricted interference." Doyle cut her off instantly. "Equipment glitch." He stepped closer to Denise until they were inches apart. "Last chance. Open the security room inside your house." Denise swallowed once. "You do not understand what you are touching." Silence hit the porch for one strange second. Doyle laughed first. "Hear that?" he shouted to the crowd. "Now she is threatening officers." More phones lifted. Somebody whispered, "She sounds crazy." Denise closed her eyes briefly. Not from fear. From exhaustion. "There are classified, enough." Doyle slammed a hand against the porch railing. "Get her down." Two officers grabbed Denise's arms. The leather wallet slipped halfway from her hand before she caught it again against her chest. One corner opened just enough for Deputy Elena Ruiz to glimpse a dark card inside with silver lettering she could not fully read. Her expression changed for an instant. Doyle saw that too. "Eyes forward, Deputy." Elena straightened immediately. Denise was forced down onto one knee on the cold wooden porch while camera flashes burst from across the street. A child standing beside his mother whispered softly, "Mom, why are they treating her like that?" The mother pulled him back without answering. Doyle crouched in front of Denise. "You know what your problem is," he said quietly. "People like you think secrets make you powerful." Denise looked him directly in the eyes. "No. People like you think uniforms do. The sentence landed harder than shouting would have. Several officers looked away. Doyle's jaw tightened. Search the house. Officers moved toward the front door. Denise suddenly spoke louder. If you break that room without authorization, every device you carry becomes evidence. One SWAT tech hesitated near the doorway. Captain, Doyle spun toward him. Move. The officer obeyed. Metal tools scraped against the reinforced lock inside the hallway. Denise's breathing became shallow for the first time. Her fingers tightened around the old wallet so hard her knuckles whitened. What was inside that room? Why did a woman living alone in a quiet neighborhood know federal containment procedure better than half the officers on scene? Elena's radio crackled suddenly. Then Doyle's. Then every radio on the street at once. Static exploded through the air. Officers winced. One patrol SUV screen blinked black before strange text appeared across the dashboard monitor. Restricted federal access detected. Doyle stared at the message only a second before slamming the screen off with his palm. Ignore it, he snapped. Keep moving. But the silence spreading through the crowd felt different now. Denise slowly lifted her eyes toward the dark sky as if she already knew something the rest of them did not. Then, from inside Doyle's patrol vehicle, a secure phone began to ring. Not once. Again. And again. Every officer near the cruiser turned toward it while the flashing lights painted the entire street blood red and ice blue. The secure phone kept ringing inside Captain Doyle's cruiser while nobody moved toward it. Red and blue light still washed across Denise Carter's face, but now the whispers around the street sounded different. Not quieter. Sharper. Nervous. Denise remained on one knee on the porch, her breathing uneven, the old leather wallet pressed tightly against her chest like the last thing she trusted in the world. Across the street, a woman lowered her phone slowly. Another neighbor muttered, "Why would federal systems react like that?" Doyle heard it. His jaw tightened instantly. "Everybody stay back," he snapped. "This woman is under active investigation." The words echoed across the quiet neighborhood, but they no longer sounded as certain as before. Denise looked down at the porch boards beneath her knees. Rainwater slid between the cracks. Her hands shook once from the cold. Or maybe from memory. Inside the house, beyond the open hallway, a faded photograph rested beside the folded American flag. A younger Denise stood between three people in military uniforms. All four were smiling. One face in the frame had been folded inward, almost hidden. Doyle suddenly grabbed the secure phone from his cruiser and glanced at the screen. His expression changed for half a second before he killed the call without answering. Deputy Elena Ruiz noticed. Denise noticed too. "Who keeps calling, Captain?" Elena asked carefully. Doyle slammed the cruiser door shut. "Focus on your assignment." He pointed toward the house. "Search every room." Two officers disappeared inside while another tightened zip cuffs around Denise's wrists. The plastic dug into her skin. She closed her eyes briefly but did not complain. A teenage boy still filming from the sidewalk whispered, "She has not even fought back." His friend answered, "Maybe she knows she is guilty." Denise heard that. Her shoulders dropped slightly, not from fear, but from something heavier. The kind of exhaustion that comes from being judged before speaking. A cold gust pushed leaves across the porch. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked once and fell silent again. Then the scene cut inward, hours earlier. Denise sat alone at a small kitchen table under weak yellow light. The same navy sweatshirt. The same tired eyes. A bottle of pain medication sat beside unpaid electric bills and a notebook filled with neat handwritten codes. An old coffee mug carried the faded emblem of a military unit scratched almost beyond recognition. The apartment was quiet except for a ticking wall clock and the hum of an aging refrigerator. Denise slowly rubbed her left wrist before opening a metal tin near the sink. Inside rested a silver challenge coin, 2 photographs, and a dark identification card wrapped carefully in cloth. She stared at the card for several seconds but did not touch it. Instead, she closed the tin again and pushed it deep into a cabinet behind canned food like she wanted the entire past hidden from the world. A message buzzed on her phone. Unknown number. She ignored it. Another arrived immediately after. We know what you are hiding. Denise exhaled slowly and turned the phone face down. In the corner of the kitchen sat an encrypted black laptop connected to a locked hard case. Tiny green lights blinked softly across its surface. Denise noticed one light flashing red instead of green. Her eyes narrowed immediately. She crossed the room and typed something fast into the system without hesitation. The warning disappeared. Not the reaction of an ordinary woman. Not the reaction of someone unfamiliar with restricted systems. But she never explained it. She only shut the laptop carefully and covered it with an old blanket before staring out the kitchen window into the dark street beyond. Sometimes silence protects people. Sometimes silence destroys them. Which one was happening here? Back outside the house, the humiliation still hung in the air. One of the officers emerged from inside holding a locked black case. Doyle grabbed it immediately. There it is, he said loudly for the crowd to hear. Restricted equipment. Denise's expression changed for the first time. Just slightly. Do not open that case, she said quietly. Doyle smirked. Now you are giving orders. Elena stepped closer. Captain, maybe we should verify chain authorization first. Doyle turned on her instantly. You want to lose your badge defending her? Elena fell silent. The crowd shifted uneasily. A small child standing beside Mrs. Evelyn Brooks looked at Denise and whispered, she looks scared. Mrs. Brooks answered softly, no, baby. She looks tired. The secure phone inside Doyle's cruiser rang again. Louder this time. Then every police radio on the street crackled at once. One officer checked his monitor and froze. Across the black screen, white letters slowly appeared. Pentagon Secure Network requesting authorization. The radio crackle spread through the neighborhood like a warning siren nobody understood. Officers stopped moving. One deputy slowly lowered his flashlight as the words Pentagon Secure Network requesting authorization continued blinking across the cruiser monitor. Denise Carter remained seated on the wet porch steps, zip cuffs tight around her wrists, while 30 officers suddenly looked less certain than before. Captain Doyle recovered first. Shut that system down, he barked. Now. Officer Grant hesitated. Sir, it is encrypted military routing. Doyle stepped closer. I gave you an order. Grant finally killed the screen, but not before Deputy Elena Ruiz noticed a line underneath the warning. Access level, priority command. Her eyes flicked toward Denise for only a second. Denise noticed. She said nothing. Across the street, more neighbors had gathered under porch lights and umbrellas. Phones glowed in the dark. A teenage boy replayed the live stream quietly. In the comments below the video, strangers called Denise dangerous, unstable, a fraud. One comment simply read, "Why are local cops touching Pentagon equipment?" Denise saw the reflection of the words in the boy's screen. Her jaw tightened slightly. The world had already decided who she was. Doyle climbed the porch steps and held up the locked black case for everyone to see. This is what criminals hide, he announced loudly. Restricted federal hardware in a civilian home. Murmurs spread instantly. Someone whispered, maybe she stole it. Another voice answered, look at her house. She could never afford that. Denise lowered her eyes for a moment. Not from shame. From exhaustion. The same exhaustion she carried every time people looked at her skin, her small home, her old sweatshirt, and decided her life before hearing her voice. Elena stepped beside Doyle carefully. "Captain, chain of custody protocols require federal verification before opening classified storage." Doyle laughed once. "You memorizing military procedure now?" Denise looked up immediately. "She is right," she said quietly. Doyle turned toward her with visible irritation. "You do not get to lecture officers about procedure." Denise met his eyes calmly. "Then stop violating it." The silence after that sentence felt heavier than the rain. Several deputies exchanged nervous looks. Denise had spoken too precisely. Too calmly. Not like someone guessing. Doyle noticed it too, and it made him angrier. "You think big words will save you," he snapped. "You are still a suspect." He pointed toward the house. "Search every room again." Officers moved deeper inside while flashlights swept across framed photographs, old military books, utility bills, and a locked filing cabinet. One deputy paused beside a wall covered in maps and coded handwritten notes. "Captain," he called carefully. "You should probably see this." Doyle entered the hallway. On the table sat an old photograph now unfolded completely. Denise stood beside a group of uniformed officials in front of a Pentagon briefing room. Her face was younger. Sharper. Confident. But the image quality was damaged, and the nameplate beneath her uniform could not fully be read. Doyle immediately snatched the photo away before others looked closer. "Old picture," he muttered. "Means nothing." But Elena saw his hand shake slightly. Outside, Denise's elderly neighbor Mrs. Brooks stepped closer to the porch despite the officers blocking the yard. "That woman brought groceries to my husband every winter," she said softly. "Even after he got sick." Doyle did not even look at her. "Ma'am, go back inside." Mrs. Brooks stood her ground. "Good people do not deserve this." For one brief second, Denise closed her eyes. The words hit harder than the cuffs. Because someone still saw her as human. Then another obstacle came immediately. A black SUV pulled onto the street. Two city officials stepped out beside local reporters carrying cameras. Doyle straightened instantly, sensing opportunity again. "Good," he said loudly enough for the crowd to hear. "Now everyone gets to watch the truth come out." One reporter pointed a camera directly at Denise. Bright light flooded her tired face. "Is it true you threatened officers?" the reporter asked. Denise remained silent. No answer. Doyle cut in fast. "That tells you everything." The crowd murmured again. The false story spread faster than the truth. Elena suddenly glanced back at the disabled cruiser monitor. The screen flickered on by itself for less than 2 seconds. Long enough for her to see a classified insignia and one partially loaded line beneath it. "Authorized oversight, D. Carter." Her breath caught instantly. Before she could speak, the system shut down again. Doyle noticed her expression immediately. "Deputy," he said coldly. "Stay in your lane." Elena looked toward Denise again, this time with real uncertainty. Not suspicion. Uncertainty. Then Officer Grant emerged from the house holding a sealed military folder he clearly was not supposed to touch. "Captain," he whispered nervously, "this file has federal command clearance markings." Doyle grabbed the folder before anyone else could read it. But as he turned, one paper slipped partially free. Elena caught a glimpse of a title line stamped across the top. Strategic Operations Authority. And beneath it, Denise Carter's name. Rainwater dripped from the edge of the porch roof onto the sealed military folder in Captain Doyle's hands. Nobody moved. Deputy Elena Ruiz stared at the partially exposed page like she had touched something dangerous. Denise Carter remained seated in the zip cuffs, breathing slowly, her deep brown eyes fixed on the folder instead of the officers around her. Doyle folded the paper shut immediately. Classified garbage, he snapped. Probably stolen. But his voice landed too fast. Too defensive. Elena noticed. Officer Grant noticed too. Across the lawn, neighbors whispered louder now. One reporter zoomed a camera toward the document. "Captain, what was on that file?" Doyle stepped in front of the lens instantly. "Evidence connected to an ongoing investigation." Denise finally spoke. Quiet. Precise. "Then you already violated federal chain procedure by opening it without authorization." Silence hit the porch again. One deputy frowned. Another slowly lowered his flashlight. Doyle turned toward her sharply. "You keep talking like military personnel." Denise looked at the wet ground. "You keep breaking military protocol." The words landed harder this time. Not emotional. Technical. Exact. Elena stepped closer before she could stop herself. "Captain, she is right about chain procedure." Doyle glared at her immediately. "You taking legal advice from a suspect now?" "No, sir," Elena answered carefully. "I am recognizing terminology." That changed the air completely. Denise's cuffs suddenly looked less certain in everyone's eyes. Doyle felt it too. He raised his voice fast to regain control. "Everybody loves pretending to be important when cameras show up." He held up the folder. "If she had real clearance, federal command would already be here." Right then, the disabled cruiser monitor inside the nearest patrol car flickered alive again. Heads turned instantly. A loading icon spun across the screen beside a Pentagon insignia. Officer Grant blinked. "Sir, nobody touched the system." Doyle stormed toward the car. "Turn it off. It is not responding." Denise slowly stood from the porch steps despite the cuffs. One officer reached for her arm automatically, but she stopped before he touched her. "Do not disconnect military authentication during a live query," she said calmly. Doyle laughed harshly. "Listen to her. Now she thinks she runs the Pentagon." But Grant hesitated instead of following the order. Because the screen had changed again. Access request pending. Authorization level unknown. Elena's expression tightened. "Sir, local systems are not supposed to receive that type of routing." Doyle ignored her. "Pull the battery if you have to." Denise looked directly at the monitor for the first time. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You already corrupted the timestamp." Grant turned fast. "How did you know that?" Denise did not answer. She simply glanced toward the dashboard clock. The seconds were blinking out of sync. Grant checked the log window nervously. His face changed instantly. "Sir," he whispered. "The timestamp is corrupted." A murmur spread through the gathered crowd. Someone near the sidewalk lowered their phone slowly. Elena stared at Denise now with open suspicion mixed with respect. Not fear. Recognition. Doyle pointed aggressively toward Denise. "Enough." He stepped closer until they stood face to face under the porch light. "You know just enough military language to confuse people. That does not make you special." Denise's voice stayed low. "No. It makes me correct." A teenage boy near the crowd whispered, "Why would she know that stuff?" His mother pulled him back immediately. "Stay out of this." But the question remained hanging over the lawn. Doyle shoved the folder toward Officer Grant. "Lock this inside the cruiser." Grant took it carefully. As he moved, another paper slipped halfway free. Elena caught a glimpse before he hid it again. Below Denise's name sat a line partially blocked by a red security stamp. Strategic Response Command, active status. Elena inhaled sharply. Doyle noticed her reaction instantly and snatched the folder back again. Nobody reads another word. Denise closed her eyes briefly. Not from fear. From memory. A memory connected to that folder. That title. That life she clearly did not want anyone here to see. Then Mrs. Brooks suddenly stepped onto the porch holding an old framed photograph wrapped in plastic. "Officer," the elderly woman said shakily, "I found this in Denise's garage after the rain started." Doyle grabbed the frame immediately. The image showed Denise years younger beside uniformed officials standing in front of a military aircraft. One man in the picture wore 4 stars on his collar. Doyle's confidence cracked for half a second. Elena saw it. Denise saw it too. Doyle recovered quickly and flipped the photo face down. Old pictures mean nothing. Denise looked directly at him for the first time since the raid began. "Then why are your hands shaking?" The crowd fell silent again. Even the rain sounded louder. Doyle's jaw tightened hard. "Bring her inside," he ordered. "Now." Officers escorted Denise toward the patrol car while cameras followed every step. As she passed the glowing cruiser monitor, the loading screen vanished completely. For one brief second, a new line appeared across the display before the system locked again. Verified command clearance, D. Carter. Elena saw it clearly this time. So did Officer Grant. Neither spoke. But both looked at Denise differently now. And across the lawn, one reporter quietly whispered into his microphone, "Who exactly did this department just arrest?" The cruiser door slammed shut beside Denise Carter hard enough to shake rainwater from the roof. Blue lights painted the neighborhood in cold flashes while cameras stayed fixed on her face. Captain Doyle stood in front of the crowd like he already owned the story. "Record this part," he told the reporters loudly. "This is what happens when somebody impersonates federal authority." Several neighbors lowered their eyes. Others kept filming. Denise sat quietly inside the cruiser, wrists still restrained, breathing controlled. The glowing dashboard monitor reflected faintly across her face. Verified command clearance, D. Carter had already vanished from the screen, replaced by system error. Doyle noticed the empty display and smiled slightly. "See," he announced. "Fake credentials. Fake systems. Fake story." Deputy Elena Ruiz frowned immediately. "Sir, system messages do not generate themselves." Doyle cut her off fast. "Enough." He pointed toward Officer Grant. "Confiscate every document from the house. Phones too." Denise finally looked up. "You need a federal warrant for classified seizure." Doyle laughed openly now. "And you need a better lie." A few people in the crowd chuckled nervously with him. Not because they believed him fully. Because authority sounded safer than doubt. Rain continued dripping from Denise's old porch roof while officers carried boxes from inside her home. Family photos. Military books. A locked hard drive. One officer held up an old folded uniform carefully. Another deputy whispered, "Captain. This has official insignia." Doyle snatched it away immediately before cameras zoomed closer. "Costume pieces," he said. "People buy fake medals online every day." Denise's eyes flicked toward the uniform for half a second. That tiny reaction did not escape Elena. Neither did the fact that Doyle folded the jacket too carefully for something he claimed was fake. Across the street, Mrs. Brooks stepped forward again despite another officer stopping her. "That woman served this country," she said shakily. Doyle pointed at her sharply. "Ma'am, if you interfere again, you will be removed." The crowd went silent. Denise spoke softly through the cruiser window. "Do not threaten her." Doyle walked closer until his reflection covered her face in the glass. "You do not give orders here." Denise held his stare calmly. Neither do fear-driven men pretending to control situations they do not understand. Doyle's jaw tightened instantly. "Open the door," he ordered. Officer Grant hesitated again. "Sir, now." The cruiser door opened. Rain hit Denise's face immediately as Doyle leaned closer. "You know what your problem is," he said quietly enough that only nearby officers heard. "People like you think uniforms erase where you came from." Elena looked at him sharply. The comment landed uglier than he intended. Denise did not react outwardly, but her fingers tightened once against the zip cuffs. "No," she answered softly. "People like you panic when they realize they judged wrong." Silence spread again. Doyle immediately turned back toward the cameras before the moment settled too deeply. "Transfer her downtown," he barked. "And shut down every military query attached to this address." Officer Grant swallowed hard. "Sir, local systems cannot override Pentagon routing." Doyle stepped close enough to intimidate him. "Then disconnect the entire server." That changed the mood completely. Even the deputies exchanged looks now. Because destroying system access sounded less like protocol and more like panic. Elena moved beside the cruiser slowly. "Captain, disabling federal routing without authorization could become obstruction." Doyle snapped toward her instantly. "You want suspension too?" Elena fell silent, but not convinced. Denise noticed that too. Tiny hope. Tiny crack. Then it vanished. Doyle grabbed the sealed military folder again and waved it toward the reporters. "This woman endangered officers with fraudulent classified material." A reporter shouted back, "Then why did Pentagon Systems recognize her name?" Doyle answered too quickly. "Because someone inside helped her." That sentence changed everything for 1 second. Officers looked at him strangely. He had admitted recognition existed before realizing what he said. Denise caught it immediately. So did Elena. Doyle noticed the mistake too late. "I mean attempted recognition," he corrected fast. But the damage lingered in the silence afterward. Suddenly the patrol car radio crackled violently. "Dispatch requesting status update. Priority channel interruption detected." Then another voice cut through the static for less than 2 seconds before disappearing. "Authorization code Sierra Black." Doyle lunged toward the radio and shut it off instantly. Too fast. Too desperate. Denise lowered her eyes quietly. She recognized the code. Elena saw that reaction immediately. "Captain," she said slowly, "what is Sierra Black?" Doyle ignored her completely. "Move the suspect." Officers surrounded Denise again while cameras followed every step toward the second cruiser waiting at the curb. The crowd whispered louder now. Not because they trusted Denise yet. Because Doyle suddenly looked afraid. As Officer Grant opened the second vehicle, something slipped from inside the military folder Doyle carried. A black identification card landed face down in a puddle beside Elena's boot. Doyle froze instantly when he saw it. Elena slowly bent down and turned the card over. Her face lost color immediately. Across the top sat a Pentagon seal. And beneath it, partially covered by mud and rainwater, was Denise Carter's photograph beside one word that made Elena stop breathing for a second. Command. Rainwater rolled across the black Pentagon card in Elena Ruiz's trembling hand. The gold seal caught the flashing police lights for 1 sharp second before Captain Doyle lunged forward and grabbed her wrist. "Give me that," he snapped. Elena did not let go immediately. That hesitation alone changed the mood around the patrol cars. Officers watched more carefully now. So did the crowd behind the barricade tape. Denise Carter stood between 2 deputies, soaked from the rain, wrists restrained, face calm. Doyle finally ripped the card free and flipped it over fast enough to hide most of the text. But not before Officer Grant saw another line beneath the word command. Active authorization. Grant swallowed hard. "Captain," Doyle cut him off instantly. "Fake credentials." He shoved the card into his coat pocket. "Anybody can print government seals." Denise looked at him quietly. "Then why did you panic when it touched the ground?" Silence hit again. Reporters immediately lifted microphones closer. Doyle pointed toward Denise angrily. She is manipulating all of you. He turned toward the cameras. This woman illegally accessed federal systems and endangered officers. No, Elena said before she could stop herself. Every head turned toward her. Doyle stared at her in disbelief. Elena kept her voice careful. Federal systems responded to her before we touched the files. Doyle stepped closer slowly. Dangerous now. Deputy Ruiz, choose your next sentence carefully. Elena looked toward Denise. Then toward the soaked black card disappearing inside Doyle's coat pocket. I think we should verify the credential through proper channels. The crowd murmured instantly. Tiny hope. Tiny crack in the wall Doyle built all night. Denise lowered her eyes briefly. Not relief. Recognition. She knew Elena had crossed a line for her. Doyle laughed coldly. Proper channels. He pointed at Denise. She lives alone in a falling-apart house. Then toward the cameras. This is exactly how scammers fool people. A few officers nodded uncertainly. Others avoided eye contact completely. Officer Grant suddenly looked down at the still glitching cruiser monitor. The screen flashed once. Access request active. Below it, a loading bar crawled slowly across the screen beside encrypted military symbols none of them understood. Grant whispered carefully, "Sir, the system is still trying to authenticate." Doyle stormed toward the cruiser. Disconnect it now. I already tried. Then smash the damn screen if you have to. That sentence landed badly. Even the reporters reacted. One cameraman lowered his equipment slowly. Denise finally spoke again. Soft. Exact. Destroying federal authentication records carries prison time. Doyle spun toward her immediately. You keep threatening officers. No, Denise answered calmly. I keep warning them. The difference sat heavy in the rain-soaked silence. Mrs. Brooks suddenly stepped closer from behind the tape again, holding a small waterproof envelope in shaking hands. Denise gave this to my husband before he died, she said softly. Said to keep it safe. Doyle immediately moved toward her. Hand it over. But the old woman hesitated this time. Everyone noticed. Denise looked directly at Mrs. Brooks and shook her head once. Tiny movement. Tiny warning. Elena saw it. So did Grant. Doyle grabbed the envelope anyway and ripped it open. Inside sat an old challenge coin stamped with a Pentagon insignia and a serial number. Grant's face changed instantly. Sir, command-level personnel carry those. Doyle answered too quickly. Collectors buy replicas. But his voice cracked slightly this time. The crowd noticed that too. If you were standing there in the rain watching all this unfold, what would you think Captain Doyle was really afraid of? Doyle shoved the coin into his pocket beside the black card and barked another order immediately. Transport her downtown now. No more delays. 2 officers moved Denise toward the second cruiser again. Elena stepped into their path for half a second. Captain, if that credential is real, moving her without federal clearance could become unlawful detention. Doyle leaned close enough for only nearby deputies to hear. You want your badge gone? Elena froze. Tiny hope vanished again. Stronger obstacle. Doyle regained control instantly. Everybody back. The officers obeyed. The crowd started believing him again simply because he sounded certain. Denise paused beside the cruiser door and looked toward the glitching monitor one more time. The loading bar suddenly jumped from 30% to 92%. Grant noticed first. Then Elena. Then Doyle. Panic flashed across his face before anger covered it again. Kill that screen, he barked. But before anyone touched it, the monitor flickered and displayed a single frozen frame from an old bodycam recording. A military convoy. Floodwaters. Smoke. And standing beside federal responders was Denise Carter wearing the same command insignia now hidden inside Doyle's pocket. Officer Grant stared at the screen in disbelief. "I have seen that uniform before," he whispered. Doyle immediately unplugged the monitor completely. Darkness swallowed the image again. But it was too late. Elena looked at Denise differently now. Not as a suspect. As someone the department should never have touched. Then her phone vibrated silently. A hidden message appeared from an unknown encrypted number. "Do not let them erase the original footage." Elena Carter stared at the encrypted message glowing on her phone while rainwater dripped from the edge of the police cruiser beside her. "Do not let them erase the original footage." The words felt colder than the storm. Around her, officers kept moving Denise toward the transport vehicle while reporters shouted questions no one answered anymore. Captain Doyle noticed Elena looking at the screen. His expression changed instantly. "Who sent that?" he demanded. Elena locked the phone without answering. Doyle stepped closer. "Deputy Ruiz. Hand me the device." Denise lifted her eyes slowly from the back seat of the cruiser. She did not speak. But Elena noticed the smallest shake of her head. Warning her. Protecting her. Even now. "It is personal," Elena answered carefully. Doyle laughed once. "No humor in it. Nothing here is personal anymore." The transport doors slammed shut behind Denise. The sound echoed across the wet street like a verdict. Hours later, Elena sat alone inside her tiny apartment above a laundromat on Mercer Street. The ceiling leaked near the kitchen sink again. Bills covered half the table beside cold coffee and her younger brother's asthma medication. She still wore her soaked deputy uniform because she had not found the strength to change. The silence after public humiliation always felt louder than the humiliation itself. She opened her locker box slowly and pulled out the old newspaper clipping she kept folded beneath her father's service medal. A photograph. Floodwaters. National Guard trucks. Federal rescue teams. And far in the background stood a younger Denise Carter wearing a dark field jacket beside military personnel. Elena traced the image quietly with shaking fingers. Her father used to point at that photo before he died. "Some heroes never wear the rank you expect," he once told her. At the time, she thought he meant soldiers. Now she was no longer sure. Her phone buzzed again. This time from Captain Doyle. "Report to station at 0600. Failure to comply will result in suspension." Another message followed immediately. "And delete any unauthorized recordings." Elena stared at the screen. Threat disguised as procedure. She placed the phone face down. Across the room, the television played muted footage from outside Denise's house. The news banner called her a possible security threat. Elena looked away immediately. The lie already sounded official. That was the dangerous part. Her little brother Marcus stepped out from the hallway rubbing tired eyes. "You look scared," he whispered. Elena forced a small smile. "I am tired." Marcus looked toward the television. "That woman on the news," he hesitated. "She looked at people like Grandma used to." Elena frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "Like she was trying to protect them even when they were being mean." The room fell quiet again. Tiny hope. Tiny truth from the only person not blinded by uniforms and cameras. Marcus walked toward the kitchen table and picked up the folded newspaper clipping. "Same woman," he said softly. Elena froze. Marcus pointed at the old flood rescue photo. Same eyes. Same calm expression. Same woman decades earlier standing beside federal responders. Elena slowly took the clipping back from him. A knock hit the apartment door suddenly. Hard. Urgent. Elena immediately stiffened. Another knock followed. Deputy Ruiz, a nervous voice whispered from outside. Please open the door before somebody sees me here. Elena cracked the door carefully. Officer Grant stood in the hallway drenched from the rain, clutching a brown evidence envelope under his jacket. His eyes kept darting toward the stairwell. I should not be here, he whispered. Elena let him inside quickly. Grant pulled out a damaged bodycam storage drive wrapped in evidence tape. I copied this before Doyle locked the system. Elena stared at the drive silently. Why? Grant swallowed hard. Because my father served overseas. He looked toward the flood rescue photo still sitting on the table. His expression changed instantly. Wait. He grabbed the clipping carefully. I know this operation. Elena's pulse jumped. Grant pointed toward a blurred figure standing beside Denise in the background. A federal commander partially visible near the convoy. This mission disappeared from public records after the embassy attack. How do you know that? Elena asked. Grant hesitated. Because my father died there. Silence filled the apartment. Old wound meeting old wound. Grant looked back toward Denise's face in the photograph. The survivors said somebody pulled civilians out before the military could reach them. His voice lowered. Nobody ever learned her real name. Elena looked at the bodycam drive now resting between them like something alive. Tiny hope returned. Then Grant's face changed suddenly as he checked his phone. Fear. Doyle knows the original footage is missing. Elena stood immediately. How? Station-wide alert just went out. Grant backed toward the door. He thinks somebody copied evidence before shutdown. Marcus looked toward Elena nervously. Are they coming here? Before Elena could answer, headlights swept across the apartment window from below. Multiple vehicles. Doors slamming outside. Elena stepped toward the blinds carefully and saw patrol units stopping near the building entrance. Doyle had found the wound. And now he was following it straight to her door. Then Elena's phone rang again. Unknown encrypted number. She answered cautiously. A calm male voice spoke only 6 words. Tell Denise Carter the secretary remembers. The line disconnected instantly. The next morning, the front lobby of Westbrook Police Headquarters looked less like a station and more like a courtroom waiting for a public execution. News vans crowded the street outside. Officers lined the walls in stiff uniforms. Phones stayed raised above shoulders. Captain Doyle stood near the main desk with command staff behind him, calm again now that cameras had arrived. Confidence had returned to his face. Denise Carter sat quietly beside Deputy Elena Ruiz at a metal table under bright fluorescent lights. Her wrists were no longer cuffed, but 2 armed officers still stood behind her chair like prison guards. Doyle looked directly at the reporters first. This department takes threats against public safety seriously, he announced. No citizen is above lawful investigation. Elena clenched her jaw. Citizen. Even now Doyle refused to say Denise's name. A giant monitor above the lobby displayed edited bodycam clips from the raid. Short clips. Cropped clips. Denise opening her front door. Officers shouting commands. Neighbors screaming. Nothing before it. Nothing after. Just enough to shape a story. Murmurs spread through the crowd immediately. She resisted. I heard federal investigators are involved. Why would 30 officers raid one house? Denise stayed silent through all of it. Her old military-style jacket rested folded beside her chair. One sleeve still carried faint water stains from years earlier. Doyle pointed toward Elena next. Deputy Ruiz violated protocol by interfering with evidence control. Several officers looked away uncomfortably. Others nodded. Fear always followed rank faster than truth. You embarrassed this department, Doyle said coldly. And for what? A woman pretending to be something she is not? Elena finally answered. Quiet. Controlled. You sent tactical units before confirming jurisdiction. The room shifted slightly at the legal wording. Doyle noticed it immediately. You are not qualified to discuss jurisdiction. Then why did federal encryption appear on her records? Elena asked. Silence. Small. Dangerous. Doyle stepped closer fast enough to reclaim the room. Because hackers exist, he snapped. Because people fake credentials. He pointed toward Denise. People like her count on sympathy. The crowd reacted exactly how he wanted. A few whispers. A few nods. One reporter lowered his camera slightly toward Denise's worn jacket and tired face like the story had already ended. False victory. Doyle turned toward the evidence desk. Delete the copied footage, he ordered Elena. Right now. Officer Grant froze near the security monitors. Elena saw it instantly. Fear. Guilt. Doyle noticed too. Problem, Officer Grant? Grant swallowed hard. No, sir. Denise finally spoke for the first time in nearly 20 minutes. Young man, she said softly to Grant, do not destroy your conscience for another person's fear. The entire room quieted for half a second. Doyle laughed sharply to kill the moment. You hear that? He mocked. Now she wants to preach morality. A few officers smirked nervously. Denise simply folded her hands together again. Calm. Still. Unshaken. Then one of the tech analysts near the monitor frowned suddenly. Sir, Doyle turned immediately. What? The archive server is acting strange. The analyst tapped the keyboard again. Someone tried restoring deleted footage overnight. Doyle's face hardened instantly. Lock it down. Elena noticed two things at once. First, Denise looked directly at the monitor without panic. Second, an unfamiliar symbol flashed briefly across the corner of the screen before disappearing again. Federal seal. Gone within seconds. Tiny hope. Tiny crack. Doyle reacted too fast. Kill the feed, he barked. Now. The screen went black immediately. Murmurs spread again. Why shut it off? What was that symbol? Did you see that? Doyle raised his voice louder to regain control. This hearing is over. He pointed toward Denise. Transfer her downstairs until federal impersonation charges are finalized. Elena stood instantly. On what evidence? Doyle turned slowly toward her. On my authority. Then he lowered his voice just enough for only Elena and Denise to hear. Some people should never forget their place. Elena felt the room go colder. Around them, phones kept recording. Cameras kept rolling. But nobody stepped forward. Nobody wanted to challenge the badge standing at the center of the room. Officer Grant suddenly moved toward Elena slightly. Small movement. Hidden from Doyle. He slipped a folded paper into her hand. A server access code. Denise noticed it too but said nothing. Microhope buried under public defeat. Then Doyle saw the movement. Enough. He slammed his hand onto the desk. Escort Deputy Ruiz out of this building. Effective immediately, her badge privileges are suspended pending investigation. Gasps spread through the lobby. Elena slowly unclipped her badge from her uniform. The metal trembled slightly in her hand before she placed it on the counter. Nobody spoke. Denise looked at the badge for a long moment. Something in her eyes changed. Sadness. Recognition. Maybe memory. Doyle smiled faintly now. He believed he had won. Denise was escorted toward the elevator surrounded by armed officers while Elena stood alone before cameras and silence. Then, just before the elevator doors closed, Doyle muttered under his breath to another captain, too confident to whisper carefully anymore. Pentagon contacts were supposed to stay buried after Kabul. Elena heard every word. So did Officer Grant. And suddenly the server monitor behind them flashed one frozen recovered frame before shutting off again. Denise Carter standing beside a 4-star general. The lobby doors locked with a heavy metallic click that echoed through Westbrook Police Headquarters like a prison gate sealing shut. Denise Carter stood alone beneath the bright station lights while reporters crowded against the glass outside. Captain Doyle had transformed the entire building into a public stage. And now he intended to end her there. "Bring her forward," Doyle ordered. 2 officers stepped beside Denise immediately. Elena Ruiz tried to move closer, but another deputy blocked her path. "You are suspended," he muttered quietly. "Do not make this worse." Elena looked toward Denise helplessly. Denise gave the smallest nod. Calm. Dignified. Still protecting others while surrounded by humiliation. Doyle walked slowly across the lobby floor holding a printed federal inquiry file high enough for cameras to see. "This woman," he announced loudly, "has interfered with active investigations, concealed federal materials, and impersonated protected personnel." Murmurs exploded through the crowd again. Phones lifted higher. Denise remained silent. Doyle smirked at the silence like it proved guilt. "You fooled your neighbors," he continued. "You fooled weak officers in this building. But today everybody sees the truth." He stopped directly in front of Denise. "You are nobody." The words landed hard. Even some officers shifted uncomfortably. Elena clenched her fists. Denise only looked at Doyle steadily. "Truth does not disappear because powerful people are afraid of it," she said quietly. Doyle laughed sharply. "Afraid? Of you?" He turned toward the giant security monitor. "Play the final footage." The screen flickered alive again. More edited bodycam clips. Officers shouting. Doors breaking open. Denise forced to the ground. Still no beginning. Still no full context. Doyle pointed toward the footage dramatically. "There. Resistance. Aggression. Threat behavior." "The timestamp is wrong," Elena suddenly said. Silence hit instantly. Doyle turned slowly toward her. "Excuse me." Elena stepped closer despite the deputies beside her. "Your footage skips 43 seconds before entry." Doyle's face darkened immediately. "Sit down, deputy. The procedure code requires full chain visibility during tactical raids." Several officers exchanged quick glances. Tiny clue. Tiny crack. Doyle snapped fast before doubt could spread. "You lost the right to discuss procedure when you compromised evidence." He pointed toward Elena now. "Maybe suspension is not enough." The room tightened again. False victory returning. Doyle looked back toward Denise. "Last chance," he said coldly. "Sign the federal cooperation statement and admit you misrepresented yourself." He slid paperwork across the table beside her. "Or you leave here in restraints." Denise looked down at the paper without touching it. Her hands trembled slightly for the first time all day. Not fear. Exhaustion. Old wounds reopening. "You already decided the outcome before you arrived at my home," she said softly. Doyle leaned closer. "Because people like you do not belong near classified systems." That sentence changed something. Several officers looked up immediately. Even Elena froze. Doyle realized too late what he had revealed. Classified systems. He looked around fast, trying to recover. "Meaning government property," he corrected sharply. "Do not twist my words." But the damage lingered in the silence afterward. Tiny hope surfaced again. Then Doyle crushed it immediately. Enough. He slammed the cooperation papers onto the desk. Cuff her. Gasps spread through the lobby. Elena stepped forward instantly. Captain, this is unlawful. Doyle pointed toward her without hesitation. Remove Deputy Ruiz from the building too. Officers surrounded Elena now. Phones recorded every second. Denise slowly stood as cuffs were brought forward. The room felt colder than before. Heavier. Final humiliation approaching. One elderly desk clerk near the back lowered her eyes in shame. A young officer quietly turned his bodycam away. Nobody stopped it. Nobody challenged the badge holding the room hostage. Denise looked once toward Elena before the cuffs closed. Protect the truth, she said quietly. Elena swallowed hard. I will. Doyle rolled his eyes. This is not a movie. Then suddenly the giant security monitor behind him flashed violently. Error codes flooded the screen. The recovered archive reopened by itself. One frozen frame appeared again for less than 2 seconds. Denise Carter beside a senior military command table. Multiple Pentagon seals visible in the background. The room stopped breathing. Doyle shouted instantly. Shut it off. The screen went black again. But this time the silence did not disappear with it. A reporter lowered his phone slowly. One officer stepped backward unconsciously. Elena noticed Doyle's hand shaking for the first time. Then the elevator doors at the far end of the lobby opened with a sharp metallic ding. Heavy footsteps approached across the floor. A deep voice cut through the silence with one word. Stop. The entire lobby froze after the voice echoed through the station. Even the reporters outside the glass doors stopped talking. Heavy footsteps crossed the polished floor slowly. Measured. Controlled. Dangerous without needing volume. A tall man in a dark military overcoat stepped into view beside 2 federal security officers. No sirens. No shouting. Just authority powerful enough to silence a room by walking into it. Captain Doyle straightened immediately. This is an active police matter, he snapped. You cannot just enter, Brigadier General Marcus Hale, the man interrupted calmly, showing federal credentials for less than a second. And I already did. Phones lowered around the lobby. Officers exchanged nervous glances. Denise Carter lifted her eyes slowly toward Hale but said nothing. Her expression did not change. That frightened Elena more than shouting would have. Hale walked directly toward the frozen security monitor still displaying the corrupted archive frame. He studied the image quietly. Denise beside military command staff. Pentagon seals partially visible. Then he looked toward Doyle. Who authorized tactical force against this residence? Doyle recovered quickly enough to fake confidence again. We acted on local intelligence. Local intelligence does not override federal jurisdiction, Hale answered. Sharp. Precise. The room tightened instantly. Doyle forced a laugh. With respect, General, nobody here has confirmed this woman is connected to federal operations. Denise remained seated while officers still held the cuffs beside her. Hale noticed immediately. So did everyone else. The silence deepened. One young deputy quietly lowered his body cam. Elena watched Doyle's confidence crack for the first time. Tiny fracture. Tiny fear. Hale extended his hand toward the evidence table. Show me the original footage. Doyle moved too fast. The archive was corrupted. Convenient, Hale replied. Another spike of silence spread across the lobby. Then Officer Grant stepped forward slightly before fear almost pulled him back again. His hands trembled. Sir, Doyle snapped instantly. Stand down, officer. Grant swallowed hard but kept moving. He placed the copied storage drive onto the evidence table beside Hale. Tiny hope entered the room like oxygen returning after suffocation. Doyle exploded immediately. That drive is unauthorized evidence. Hale picked it up carefully. No, he answered without looking away from Doyle. This is called preservation. Denise finally spoke softly from her chair. Truth survives longer than panic. Nobody laughed this time. The giant monitor flickered again as the recovered server tried rebooting itself. Error messages vanished one by one. Federal encryption codes rolled across the screen too quickly for reporters to read. Several officers stepped backward instinctively. Doyle pointed toward the monitor. Kill it now. The tech analyst hesitated. Sir. I cannot. More silence. More fear. Elena noticed reporters lowering their microphones now instead of raising them. Even the crowd outside sensed the balance shifting. But not fully. Not yet. Doyle still held the room through force, badges, uniforms, procedure. This woman manipulated military systems, he barked loudly toward the cameras. That does not make her innocent. Hale turned slowly toward him. Nobody manipulates those systems accidentally. Another sharp silence. Denise lowered her gaze briefly toward the old flood rescue photograph still partially visible inside Elena's case file beside the evidence desk. Hale noticed it too. His expression changed slightly. Recognition. Memory. Something older than this station. If you were standing in that room, what would you think Captain Doyle feared most right then? The footage? The woman? Or the possibility that every person watching suddenly realized the wrong side had been wearing uniforms all along? The monitor beeped sharply. One recovered video file finally loaded to 47%. A grainy frozen frame appeared. Denise standing inside a military briefing room years earlier beside senior defense officials. Her face younger. Calm. Respected. The room stopped breathing again. Doyle pointed immediately toward the screen. Deep fake, he said too quickly. Federal fabrication exists. But his voice cracked on the final word. Hale looked toward the analysts. Restore full playback. No. Doyle shouted. You do not have authority here. Hale slowly reached inside his coat and placed a sealed federal authorization folder onto the evidence table. Thick black lettering stamped across the front, Pentagon Oversight Division. Several officers visibly stepped backward. Elena heard somebody whisper near the reporters, "Who is she?" Denise remained silent. Still not defending herself. Still protecting something larger than her own humiliation. Then Doyle made his final desperate move. Escort General Hale out until legal counsel arrives, he ordered the officers nearest him. Nobody moved. Not one. The room had started choosing silence over obedience. Hale opened the federal folder slowly. Inside rested a classified service badge partially hidden beneath redacted documents. Beside it was an old operation photograph matching the one Elena kept at home. Same flood rescue mission. Same faces. Same woman standing at the center. Hale looked toward the screen as the loading bar climbed higher. 58%. 62. 68. Then he faced the room and spoke one sentence that drained the last color from Doyle's face. Before you judge her, he said calmly, watch this. The loading bar reached 100%. Then the recovered footage began to play across the giant monitor above the police station lobby. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The video opened inside a secure military briefing room dated 11 years earlier. Federal seals covered the walls. Pentagon officials stood around a command table during the Kabul evacuation crisis. Then Denise Carter walked into frame. Younger. wearing a dark operations jacket with federal insignia stitched at the shoulder. Every voice inside the footage stopped when she entered. A senior defense official stood immediately. "Director Carter," he said clearly. "We are ready for your authorization." The police station lobby fell silent. Completely silent. Phones lowered slowly. Officers stared upward without blinking. Elena felt her chest tighten as the title appeared beneath Denise's name on the archive screen. Director of Special Operations Liaison, United States Defense Intelligence Response Division. Captain Doyle went pale instantly. "Fake," he snapped too quickly. "That footage is manipulated." Brigadier General Hale did not even look at him. "Run identity confirmation." The tech analyst obeyed immediately now. Fingers shaking across the keyboard. Federal databases unlocked one after another across the monitor. Clearance records. Mission files. Commendations. Then Denise Carter's active federal rank appeared beside encrypted Pentagon credentials still valid under national authority protections. Audible gasps spread through the station. One officer quietly removed his hand from his holstered cuffs. Another stepped backward from Denise like he suddenly understood who had been sitting in front of them all night. Doyle tried again. Even if she held a federal position before, she never identified herself during the raid. Denise finally looked directly at him. "Calm. Controlled. Because your officers arrived with rifles before questions." The room absorbed the sentence slowly. Painfully. Hale stepped toward the evidence monitor and played the next recovered section. This time the footage showed the beginning of the raid. Denise opening her front door peacefully. Her hands visible. No threat. No resistance. Then Doyle's own voice echoed from the speakers before forced entry even began. "Take her down before federal response arrives." Silence shattered across the lobby like glass. Several officers turned toward Doyle immediately. Elena stared at him in disbelief. The crowd outside the station pressed harder against the windows now. Reporters stopped narrating. They were listening instead. Doyle shook his head violently. "Out of context." Hale answered coldly. Then explained the deleted timestamps. Another recovered file appeared automatically beside the footage. Internal police edits. Evidence tampering logs. Authorization signatures. Captain Nathan Doyle. The room changed instantly. This was no longer suspicion. No longer rumor. It was proof. Elena slowly looked toward Denise again. For the first time all night, the station no longer saw a frightened black woman cornered by police. They saw someone powerful enough that 30 officers had been sent to silence her before federal systems could react. Denise remained seated. Still humble. Still tired. Still saying less than anyone else in the room. "Why did you hide your identity?" Elena asked quietly. Denise looked toward the frozen image of Kabul on the monitor. "Because some missions never end when the cameras leave." Another silence. Heavier now. Human. One reporter near the front lowered his microphone completely. "My God," somebody whispered. Doyle made one final desperate attempt. "She interfered with local investigations." Hale turned sharply. "She outranks your mayor." The sentence hit the room like a detonation without sound. Several officers visibly froze. The desk clerk covered her mouth. One young deputy looked away in shame. Denise closed her eyes briefly like she had heard those words too many times before in rooms exactly like this. Not victory. Exhaustion. Hale placed the classified service badge onto the evidence table beside Denise's old flood rescue photograph. Object meeting truth. Past meeting present. Director Denise Carter coordinated extraction corridors during the Kabul civilian evacuation, Hale announced. She holds active federal emergency authority under defense oversight protocols. He looked directly at Doyle now. And you knew federal records existed before your raid even began. Doyle's silence answered for him. Then Officer Grant stepped forward, trembling slightly. Captain Doyle ordered deletion before the warrant review, he admitted quietly. I heard him. The station turned toward Doyle fully now. No more divided loyalties. No more uncertainty. Doyle opened his mouth again, but no words came. Denise looked at him steadily. No hatred. No revenge. Just disappointment old enough to feel permanent. Then Hale asked the final question. Quiet. Surgical. Captain Doyle, if she was such a threat, why did you try so hard to erase the footage before anyone saw who she really was? Doyle could not answer. At that exact moment, the main entrance doors opened behind the crowd, and 3 federal investigators in dark suits stepped inside carrying sealed suspension orders. The federal investigators walked through the stunned crowd without raising their voices. Dark suits. Silver credentials. Quiet authority. Every officer in the station stepped aside instinctively. Captain Nathan Doyle tried to straighten his posture, but his hands were trembling now. One investigator placed a sealed suspension packet directly onto the front desk beside Doyle's badge. Captain Nathan Doyle, she said evenly, you are hereby suspended pending federal investigation into evidence tampering, abuse of authority, unlawful raid authorization, and obstruction of federal oversight. Nobody spoke. The sound of the paper hitting the marble desk echoed through the lobby harder than shouting ever could. Doyle looked toward his officers for support. Most avoided his eyes. One younger deputy slowly unclipped his own body cam and placed it onto the evidence counter beside Denise Carter's recovered service badge. A silent choice. A silent apology. Doyle swallowed hard. This is political, he muttered weakly. Brigadier General Hale stepped forward immediately. No, he answered. This is documented. The recovered footage continued looping silently on the overhead screen now. Doyle ordering deletion. Doyle authorizing forced entry. Doyle ignoring federal database warnings connected to Denise's address. Every lie collapsing under its own weight. Elena stood near the evidence table holding the old flood rescue photograph Denise had protected all night. The edges were worn soft from years of being carried. Hale noticed it and lowered his voice slightly. You kept that with you the entire time? Denise nodded once. 3 children survived because we reached the roof before the water line rose. The room absorbed the sentence quietly. One officer looked down in shame. Another removed his cap completely. Denise never once used her rank to humiliate them back. That silence changed everything. Doyle made one final attempt to save himself. I was protecting this city. Denise looked at him steadily. From what? He had no answer left. The federal investigator extended her hand calmly. Badge. Doyle hesitated. For one painful second, he looked like he might refuse. Then slowly, in front of every officer, every civilian, every camera still recording, he unclipped his captain's badge and placed it onto the counter beside Denise's federal credentials. Status reversed without a single scream. A dispatcher in the back quietly turned off the live stream comments feed after viewers across the city began demanding accountability. Phones lowered throughout the station. The same crowd that had whispered about Denise hours earlier now watched her with stunned respect. One elderly woman near the entrance spoke softly. They treated her like a criminal. Another answered quietly, because they never thought she mattered. General Hale turned toward the assembled officers. Effective immediately, all disciplinary actions filed against Ms. Carter tonight are void. He looked toward Elena next. Officer Elena Ruiz will retain full witness protection under federal review for cooperating with evidence recovery. Elena's eyes filled instantly. Doyle stared at her in disbelief. You betrayed your department. Elena shook her head slowly. No. I protected what it was supposed to be. Silence again. Heavier this time. Cleaner. One federal technician restored the deleted evidence logs fully onto the public review monitor. Time stamps corrected. Warrants corrected. Internal reports amended. Denise Carter's name appeared properly in the system for the first time all night without red flags or false alerts. Verified Federal Operations Liaison. The desk clerk who had refused Denise entry earlier lowered her head quietly. "Ma'am. I am sorry." Denise answered gently. "Do better for the next person." The words hit harder than anger ever could. Hale picked up Denise's old service badge carefully and handed it back to her with both hands. "Not as evidence now. As respect." Denise stared at it for a long second before closing her fingers around it again. The same badge Doyle tried to bury under paperwork and force. Around the room, officers began removing temporary incident tape. Security barriers came down. Systems reopened. Truth repaired the space piece by piece. But Denise still looked tired. Not victorious. Just tired. Because dignity returning does not erase what humiliation costs. Then a young black girl standing beside her grandmother near the lobby entrance stepped forward shyly holding a cracked phone. "Miss Carter," she whispered. Denise turned toward her. The little girl smiled nervously. "You still stayed calm when everybody was wrong about you." Denise's face softened for the first time all night. Real warmth finally breaking through the exhaustion. The girl held out the old flood rescue photograph carefully. "I think this belongs to a hero." Denise accepted it silently. Then General Hale looked toward the hallway leading deeper into the Federal Operations Wing behind the station. The secured doors slowly unlocked with a soft mechanical click. "Director Carter," he said quietly, "there are people waiting upstairs who never stopped believing in you." Denise looked toward the opening doors while the old photograph rested against her chest, and for the first time all night, she seemed uncertain whether she was ready to walk back into the life they had tried so hard to erase. The secured federal doors opened slowly, and Denise Carter stood still for one long second before stepping forward. The station that had humiliated her only hours earlier now watched in complete silence. Nobody laughed anymore. Nobody whispered. Her old service badge rested in her palm beside the worn flood rescue photograph she had protected through every accusation, every insult, every attempt to erase her name. Brigadier General Hale walked beside her without rushing. Not above her. Beside her. That mattered. Officers moved out of the hallway instinctively as Denise passed. Some lowered their eyes. Some nodded quietly. One young deputy who had mocked her earlier removed his cap completely and said in a strained voice, "Ma'am. I should have listened." Denise stopped only briefly. "Listen to the next person sooner," she answered gently. No anger. No victory speech. Just truth. Inside the Federal Operations Room upstairs, a new personnel record had already been restored onto the national system under her full title, Director Denise Carter, Pentagon Emergency Operations Liaison. The red flags Doyle inserted into her file were gone. Her years of service. Her commendations. The flood rescue records. Every erased detail restored line by line across the screen. Elena Ruiz stood near the doorway watching quietly with tears still in her eyes. Denise turned toward her first. "You protected the evidence when nobody else would." Elena shook her head emotionally. "You protected me first." That silence carried more weight than applause. General Hale placed a thin folder onto the conference table. Inside was a formal recommendation for Denise to lead a new federal community oversight initiative designed to prevent unlawful raids and abuse targeting vulnerable families. Denise stared at the proposal quietly. "You want me back in the system after tonight?" Hale answered without hesitation. "No. We want the system to become worthy of people like you." Denise looked down at the old flood photograph again before carefully sliding it into the new folder beside the program contract. Past pain beside future change. Downstairs, the station lobby had transformed completely by morning. Temporary barriers were gone. Phones lowered. Reporters stood quietly behind designated lines instead of shouting. The giant public monitor near the front desk now displayed a new departmental policy announcement requiring independent review for all forced entry warrants tied to anonymous reports. A small line appeared underneath it, initiated following the Carter review. Her name no longer spoken like suspicion. Spoken like correction. Near the entrance, the same elderly woman who defended Denise earlier sat beside her granddaughter waiting for a bus home. The little girl saw Denise first and ran toward her carefully holding a small notebook. "Miss Carter," she asked shyly, "can I become somebody important even if people judge me first?" Several officers nearby overheard the question and froze quietly. Denise crouched slightly to meet the girl's eyes. "Important people are not measured by who fears them," she said softly. "They are measured by who feels safe around them." The girl smiled instantly. Denise signed the notebook gently and handed it back. One dispatcher watching nearby wiped away tears quietly. Even Captain Doyle appeared once more only briefly through a hallway window in plain clothes, escorted toward Internal Affairs Review. No badge. No command voice. Just silence. Denise did not look at him long. The story no longer belonged to his downfall. It belonged to what survived it. Before leaving, Denise walked back to the evidence counter one final time. The desk clerk who once refused her entry stood nervously behind it. Denise placed the old flood photograph onto the counter for a moment beside her restored badge. "Frame this," she said calmly. "Not for me. For the next officer who forgets what dignity looks like." The clerk nodded immediately. "Yes, ma'am." Outside, dawn light spilled across the station steps. Elena exited beside her carrying a small evidence archive box. The little girl waved excitedly from the bus stop nearby. Officers stood straighter now when Denise passed them. Not out of fear. Out of respect. Denise slipped her restored badge carefully into her coat pocket and stepped forward into the morning air with her head finally held high. Behind her, the station doors remained open. And for the first time in a very long time, someone weak, frightened, and overlooked walked through those doors without being treated like they did not belong.